My name is Catherine Pappas. I was born in Canada, in Montreal. I work both as a filmmaker, photographer, but also as a project manager for a Canadian NGO called Alternative, which is based in Montreal. I work as a project manager and also as a filmmaker. I work in the Middle East very much, a bit in Afghanistan. I was working in Pakistan a little bit. Alternative was founded in the mid-90s, but it came together with there were three groups that came together. One that was working very much in South Africa against apartheid, another one that was working very much on the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and the third one that was working in South Asia. So all three came together and formed the NGO Alternative. We work in a particular way, and we don't set up offices usually in the countries where we work, but we try to support the local partners. We work mainly to support the civil society groups that are working in these countries. So if they say that education is their focus, so we'll support them in this. Or if they're working on anti-globalization issues, we'll support them on this issue, or on media initiatives. It's very different from country to country. In Afghanistan, something that I probably found the most difficult is to put myself in the situation of people that came out of decades of war. And I remember expecting things differently in a way, although it wasn't, I mean, the groups, our partners were doing the work, but you arrive from a country and I've never known war before, and you come there and you think that things have to happen in a certain way, but they can't, because some things are so unimportant to people, because they've lost their home, they've lost their family, their brothers, their sisters, their fathers very often. And coming to realize this is something that I found the most important and very, very difficult. If I take Palestine, for example, one of the most difficult things I found I lived in Jerusalem for a year, and I couldn't understand how Palestinians managed to continue fighting, because after the first week I was already frustrated with the checkpoints, with the harassment of the military as well, with the closing, going into Gaza and being interrogated for 3 hours, coming out being again interrogated for 3 hours. So it was among the most difficult things I find. I guess the post-Bush area might change a few things, but I'm not exactly sure it can. But it's terrible. I mean, the devastation that the American policy has done, whether it's in Iraq, whether it's in Afghanistan, whether it's in Palestine, I mean, we're putting barriers into what civil society can do. The policy is, and I mean, Iraq is destroyed today. There's a civil war, and it's directly caused by the American invasion. You have the war in Iraq, which is not the situation the situation in Afghanistan, which is getting worse every day. Yes, it's a very difficult position. People develop coping mechanisms. They have to. I mean, I remember when I used to work in Palestine, I wasn't allowed to stay in Gaza as such, so I traveled from Jerusalem to Gaza very, very often in the week. So I used to arrive in Gaza early in the morning, and I used to work with 2 women's centers in Gaza, and the girls used to come to the center, to the office in the morning, and so I used to ask them, how was your evening? And they said, well, there were the helicopters that were flying over all the time, and there was some bombing, we don't know exactly where, and there were the ambulances that were going, and there was always something that would happen. And so in the beginning, you kind of wonder how people survive this, or how they can just continue living, but they do. They said, you know, this is our life. This is what we were born into, and this is unfortunately what will be going on for the next year. My role as a photographer, filmmaker, I think is to break the stereotypes. When people looked at the photographs I did in Afghanistan, I remember someone going through them and he said, this is not Afghanistan. And I was very surprised, because he'd never been to Afghanistan. So So why isn't it Afghanistan? And I realized because there were no burqas, there were no people in turbans, and there were no stereotyped images. There were just people that looked like me or you. There were some burqas, but it wasn't very fundamental. There weren't people dying on the pictures necessarily. There were ordinary people. And for me, this is very important to show in photography too. After September 11, but even before, there was the image of the barbarian that was promoted, especially in this region, where the Muslim is a terrorist, is a barbarian, is different from us. So we can do anything. We can have a war in Iraq and it doesn't matter because they're not real people. We can have a war in Afghanistan and we're just saving the women. And it's not true. I mean, it's a discourse that's constructed, and we have to, as filmmakers and photographers, manage to deconstruct it, to stop promoting this image of the terrorist. I think you have to, and I think it's true. I mean, there are changes that are happening. I mean, you look at Latin America and all of the political changes that came about in the last years, and it is part of. It is because civil society and organizations work to educate people, to inform people, to show that there's a different world possible. You look at Iraq, and despite the war that's going on, and that's terrible, there are people that are fighting and that are making a difference. And step by step, I think it's possible to change what's going on.